All right. So I am incredibly honored and excited and humbled to have the great Paul Duerden on the podcast today. For people that are unaware, don't know him, don't come from a volleyball background, I got the fortune of recording for the Olympics at the same time and being introduced to Paul through my broadcasting partner, Karen Larson. And we got to have a night where a whole bunch of us went out and had a drink or whatever and had some dinner. And so I got to meet Paul that way and got to know him over the 8-9 days that I was, maybe 10 days that I was there, I guess, 8 days on air. And just like a super cool, down to earth, amazing dude with like the best resume in Canadian volleyball history. So you've commentated 2 games, I think.
Correct. Yep.
And you were Volleyball Canada Hall of Fame and the youngest inductee into the London, Ontario City Hall of Fame for sport, and the CEO of InnoSoft Canada, and on the national squad for 15 years. And I think I read at one time considered the best volleyball player in the world. So obviously a world-class volleyball player. I'm sure there's lots of things I'm missing. So I'd love it if you could give me a little more of some other things that you've been able to do in your athletic endeavors.
Sure. Well, you nailed it. All of that was correct. First off, though, thanks for having me on the show, Josh. Awesome to see you again. Like you said, it was great to meet last summer covering the games. That was a wild time working long nights overnight, but yeah, good to see you on more normal hours here. And
right.
Yeah, you kind of covered it. I just normal kid, grew up playing a ton of sports. I was born and raised in London, Ontario, and then after high school was selected to the national team, where put any thoughts of going to university on hold. At least thought it was temporary in the beginning, and then it ended up being permanent. And as the volleyball thing went really well, I played for the national team for 15 years. Part of the reason for that was just continually trying to qualify for the Olympics. I never made it to the games as a player, and then I was fortunate enough to have a fairly extensive professional career as well. So I played 14 seasons in Europe. So kind of start to finish 17 years straight of international ball, and then retired, was completely lost. And over the last 10 years, I've kind of rebuilt who I am and my identity, and now work in the recreation world, making software to help people get active. So it's been a neat journey.
Yeah, it's really funny. I think that's not spoken about enough. There was, I can't think of his name now, an Olympic champion from Canada that was a kayaker. He's now in politics, Oakville, Ontario.
Vancouver.
Yeah, Adam Vancouver. He talks about post-Olympic depression. I've heard him speak about that. And there's some similarities between us, not a ton, but I also am a person that strived to be a high performance athlete. You were very successful in that way, but didn't get your Olympic journey, which I also was unable to make an Olympic squad for Canada. And the time frame, I think the thing that was important to me is like, no matter the time frame that journey ends, if you're a person that's been chasing that dream for literally your life, you probably started playing volleyball and being involved in sport very young. I was allowed on the mats as a judoka at 3.5 years old is when I was allowed on the mats. And my goal from the time I was 6 was I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. My athletic career ended at about 23 years old, but very much the same thing. You identify yourself so much with this dream that you're chasing that whether you're successful and you get every bit of success that you want, or you don't, or anywhere in between, when that ends, it is a really tough thing to be like, you have to find your individual self, whatever that means going forward. And for me, that was like a shovel to the face. Like, it was pretty dramatic when you decide, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. Oh my God, what does it all mean? That was a huge moment for me too.
Oh yeah, I think it's unfortunately extremely common for athletes, especially those that take it to a high level, because as you said, it really boils down to your identity. I was known as Paul the volleyball player. My friends were volleyball players. Every day was volleyball. 17 years straight, at a high level. And like you said, when you're a kid too, before that, leading up to it and wanting it. And the focus that it takes and the discipline and the things that you have to kind of say no to make it even more intense for that identity to have importance, you know, and you stake kind of your own personal value in your mind sometimes on, because it's all about the volleyball, winning and losing, because if all I do is volleyball, if I'm not winning, then I'm not a good person. You know, I have no value.
Right.
And so that kind of story is under the surface there. And then, like you said, yeah, when you stop, your identity is ripped away, like for me at least. And it was, you know, who am I? What value do I have now? I'm no good. I can't hit a ball around here. You know, what's that going to do to help the family? And any kind of a career moving forward. So it's, I think it's why you see a lot of people actually, you know, get into coaching maybe for the wrong reason, or try to stay in the sport for the wrong reason, because it's what they know and the unique thing. And then I think most, if not all, athletes deal with it, at least on some level, for sure.
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's really hard. And when you talk about like your self-worth, it's so like, I didn't expect us to go necessarily into the weeds in this, but you know, there's a lot of things relationship wise that are connected to that. When you're used to being an athlete that's performing and you're so goal oriented and you're so connected to the success or failure of those goals, it affects every part of your life, or it can, and it did with me. And so when you stop that, it's like, I don't know how to, I know this might sound a little silly to some people or whatever, but like, am I worthy of someone's love now that I'm not doing what I did and I'm
100%.
not working towards these achievements? Like, that is me. So if I'm not doing that, I'm a shell of myself. That's not true. Like, this is what we tell ourselves. That's obviously not true, but we get so much into the weeds that way that it's like, you stop competing and like, should someone date me? Should someone give me that time of day? Should people like, and that's, for me, to some degree, I would say that's a struggle that doesn't just turn off. We've been that way so long. It's been 16 years since I've competed, and a part of me still operates that way. I'm still incredibly goal oriented. I'm still motivated that way, in a sense, like trying to earn that love and respect, because it just becomes such a part of a personality trait, I find.
Yeah, you're really nailing it, I think, and you clearly get it. It's something Tony Robbins teaches on, is like, there's the human needs that he talks about, is that we all have a need for significance. We all have a need for certainty. We also have a need for uncertainty. So if everything was the same every single day, you know, we get bored. And then we have a need for love and connection. Those are the kind of four basic ones that he talks about. And then beyond that, there's contribution and learning and growth. But kind of those four kind of fundamental building blocks. And if you think about us in sport, you know, we get so much significance from our sport. You know, you're the man on the mat. You're the professional. You know it. You've put in the 10,000 hours. You put in the 20,000 hours. You're an expert. You know, so you get a ton of significance from that, control in that realm, and then you have the uncertainty of competition. So it's super addictive, and then you get connection as well, because you're connected to people. And these tight bonds in the team with your coach, with the people you train with. And so it's, you know, Tony says, if you meet any three of those needs, it's an addictive activity.
Right.
And so it's a slam dunk for high performance sport. And so when it goes away, significance goes away, your certainty goes away. A lot of the love and connections that you have with teammates and that environment goes away. And then with it goes that whole identity and feeling of self. So it is, you have this fear of, am I even lovable? Am I worth anything? And so, yeah, it was a huge process for me after retiring. You know, kind of just, my wife described it as I was a shell of myself, and just this kind of walking zombie on autopilot for a couple of years, just lost and not connecting with my kids. And it was just a continual work on myself, on my thoughts, getting out and learning new things and creating new things for me to understand that, yeah, I can be more than this. I can flip around. So it's been a process, man. It was a hell of a struggle for years, but
yeah. For me, I would say it's not necessarily a struggle now, but it's not gone either. It's like, You know, I think anyone that deals with anything that they've gone through, whatever that is, I think that lingers, has a lingering effect that sort of can hang on to some degree. So that's that way for me. It's like another example to that point is the idea of becoming less goal oriented is really difficult for me. That's a really hard concept because so many things get weighed into it. So then when I'm so goal oriented, part of it, I think, is that if I achieve some goal now no longer as an athlete, I'm striving for that same feeling. It's that same hit. So it's like, I got this position where I got to commentate the Olympics, and I didn't go into it thinking that it was more than that, but it's this crazy high. You get to meet the people that you get to meet, like yourself and Karen Larson and Donovan Bailey, and my kids got to meet Donovan Bailey, and, you know, a childhood hero. So you have this incredible high. And I think in subconscious way, you think this will make you more whole, like winning a tournament is going to make you more whole. And then after it's over, nothing's different. It was a great experience. I had so much fun. I'm so happy with the people I got to meet. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But then you go home, you know, and you're just you at home again. It's your life didn't become so much significantly different afterwards. And so things like that still happen to me.
This episode is brought to you by Mattify, which produces beautiful yoga mats like my favorite one right here with the cork surfaces. I do yoga myself, and I'm a huge fan of these mats. They ship anywhere in Canada, and you can even have a discount if you use the promo code A Fighting Chance at checkout. Check them out.
I love how you phrase that, because it's got me thinking that the win here, none of it's right or wrong. And like you said, you still have those feelings about thinking back past and that identity, and that, like you mentioned, that drive to want to win all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not good or bad. But what's key, or the nuance, is knowing yourself to know why, so that it's not controlling you.
Right.
It's fine for you to be like completely goal driven if that's what you're actually choosing, and not these identities and this need for significance or something is choosing it for you, which is what was happening when I was a player. I know that when I was a player, I felt like I had to win to be worthy. And I know now that I don't. I want to, if I'm doing something, I want to compete to win. But if I don't win, I know I'm a good person. I am lovable. I bring value. And that knowledge of knowing yourself allows you to take the control back.
Right.
And, you know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think, you know, again, not we expected to go this way, but 30 was a tough birth year for me. Like when I turned 30, it felt like I didn't know myself, and that I look at everyone else, and everyone else has their stuff together. Is sort of how it felt. And I'm this recovering sports addict trying to figure out my life still to some degree, you know. And what I learned a lot in my 30s, I think, or what I believe I've learned, is that everyone's in the same boat. Everyone thinks everyone else has their stuff together. Learning that other people, you're not individual in that feeling, and that, you know, I'm getting better and better and better at life, I'd say, as I approach 40 now, of, you know, it, as cliche as it is just the journey. That's the thing you have to accept and appreciate every day, whether that's athleticism or life or business or whatever it is like embracing that you can enjoy the grind. That's the part that's like the part that you should probably embrace no matter, instead of necessarily only wanting the end game.
Oh, that's so true. Like if you think about a big match that you won, a big fight that you won, you know, how long does that feeling last? You know,
So
I don't know if it's something insane, maybe longer than that, but that's such a tiny part of your life. All of the rest of it and the training and all that is, like you said, the journey, and you got to love that. Your life can't be hinging on whether or not you achieve this goal or not. It's got to be loving the process up to it, and being able to separate from that outcome to you know, just enjoy and be happy generally. Otherwise, you train for 4 years, you get sick right before the competition, and you don't perform well, and that is completely out of your control. And is that going to define your life?
Right. Right. Does that make you a bad athlete? It doesn't.
Yeah,
None of that stuff is a factor.
It can't.
Right.
Who you are every day is, like I love that saying of how you do anything is how you do everything. Like,
Right.
that's that continual, personal strive for excellence that you talk about, that setting goals, that's who you are,
Right.
not the result. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Getting less goal and not necessarily goal oriented, but those goals don't have to be, the focus doesn't have to be what I like to call like the impossible goals. The impossible goals being an Olympian, the impossible goals being the best volleyball player in the world. The goals that we set can be small daily goals, and achieving those daily goals removes a lot of anxiety for me personally. Like, I really love checklists. So it's like, oh, I have this stuff to do for work. I have to record a podcast with yourself and feel prepared and all that. It's like, there's anxiety to all those little things, and you start just checking them off. And those things every day is like enjoying, like, hey, today I made sure I went for my run, or I made my coffee instead of buying it. Like, those little, as small as that is like, those little goals are what, sort of bring me the joy in the day. And when it becomes those achievable daily goals, it's like the Japanese expression Kaizen, small improvements every day lead to that over time, right? And so it's like, if I do those things every day, those other things will happen. But thinking that marriage is the wedding day, right? That's sort of the equivalent.
Oh yeah. Perfect
It's
example.
not.
Yeah. And those little things that you're talking about, those are the things that you're keeping your word to yourself, which makes you love yourself more, believe in yourself more, gives you more self-confidence. It's, the worst thing we can do is kind of break a commitment or a word to ourselves. And just like you said, by just making it those little things, those positive things, you just get that momentum, and that really can shape, a positive identity about who you are.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that I found is, in modern times, it's really, really hard. There's so many distractions. There's probably literally always been, and anyone can make a distraction for things, right? But it's not always that life now is so much more challenging than it's ever been. It's just different in some ways. But the other thing that I find is finding an ability to be present is a really powerful tool for me, because it's, again, I think connected to that is, it's easy to not be present when my goal is, in 4 years, I want to have a house for $1 million or whatever that is, right? If that's what you're thinking about all the time, you get lost in the journey, you're distracted by it. And so what I've found is finding things that make me really be present. So sometimes I do yoga. Another thing that I find really meditative like that is actually cooking, because if I'm cooking something and I want to make something that's really difficult, like a couple months ago, I made French croissants for the first time. It's a long process. And if I'm not paying attention, I'm not going to end up with a croissant in the end. But it really makes me, like, as weird as that seems in a way, it really makes me be present to challenge myself by making things I've never made in the kitchen before. And when we do things that are not necessarily challenging in any way on our daily lives, it's so easy to pick up our phone and scroll. And I'm not saying that all of that's all bad either, but for me personally, I find like being present is not necessarily easy for me as a person that gets a little scrambled and excited about many things. And so finding processes to be present, or really good conversation, is another way that I love being present. I just enjoy having conversations with people. Those moments are things that I really cherish now, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And it's having got 5 kids through a blended family from ages 11 to 22 now, and I've seen it, at various times, especially with social media and phones, but just the extra work it takes to make sure that you're connecting, even with just your kids, to get devices away, to get everyone down together for a meal. Massive dividends though. And as you're saying about staying present and cooking the croissant, another thing that popped in my head too is you think about, when you're under the bar and you're squatting, or you're benching, or you've got a weight in your hand, you're present. Because if you're not, you're getting hurt, right? Or when you're on the mat, you are 100% present, which is kind of one of the cool things about sport, and why I think relationships are so strong in it. Because when you're really working with a teammate or a training partner, or sparring, or whatever it is, you're connected. Like, you're right there. There are no distractions.
Right.
And that kind of popped in my head, making me think, it's a unique environment to keep you present.
Right. Yeah. It's and you're so seduced by it in whatever ways. Like, I think sport has a massively powerful social aspect. almost all of my best friends are judoka. So you have this social aspect, and the bonds are so strong. I like to compare it, not knowing, I've never been in the military, but I would estimate they would be similar to people that are in the military. Having to spend all this time together with a common goal is a very powerful thing to bring people together. And yeah, and weight, yeah, especially like as not a weightlifter, but someone who lifts weights and did in a part of my training, same thing. Like, yeah, you do a heavy low bar squat and you're not paying attention and you're distracted thinking about someone that just sent you a text message, you're dropping that bar. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you're not lifting it. So
True.
yeah, that's a really good point. Like I sometimes forget that, but that's probably what draws me to lifting weights now, because I don't necessarily truly enjoy doing it. It's hard. I don't know if I love it.
Yeah.
But it's another thing that makes me be present, and yeah, that's really powerful. Like being present's a really powerful tool, I find.
Yeah, and just like you said, these days harder to do. There's distractions everywhere. So
right. Yeah.
It's a skill everyone needs.
Yeah, whatever your niche is. I mean, a lot of people do it with running, or up here in Northwest Territories, there's a lot of cross country skiing because we've got snow forever. So yeah, it's like maybe it's taking in nature, or maybe it's playing your sport, or maybe it's both those things, or checking in to be present regularly. Yeah, there's lots of ways to do it, and know that there is like a method or a model that you will probably, that you can enjoy. You're not limited to one thing. It might be many things.
Right.
I guess on a sort of going back in time note, outside of your obvious physical presence, you're not a little guy. Like, what are you, 6'4"?
Oddly enough, I was one of the smaller guys on the team. Like I was 6'4". So
right.
Yeah, I felt the team, and then felt tall again when I come home and hang out with non-volleyball players.
Right. So from that standpoint, like what was your draw to volleyball? When did you start playing? What was the hook for you?
I have to say it's just the environment I was in. Growing up, I loved playing all sports, Canadian kid. So obviously held a hockey stick and played hockey, but loved playing pickup basketball with buddies when I was young, and then soccer, like that, swing, something aligned. But gentleman by the name of Von Peck was coaching at Oak. I went to high school, and just kind of, if you dropped him in the water and looked at all the ripples that came away from Vaughn, of all the coaches that he impacted and players, he's one of those people in the sport that just, lifelong coach, lifelong mentor. And so he saw me in the hallway and said, "Hey, we got volleyball tryouts. Come on out." And my neighbor, Jamie Nielsen, as well, like his parents are kind of like my godparents, told me to go try out for volleyball. And that was the first sport in the fall at Oak Ridge. There's football or volleyball. I went out, and then I knew the football team wasn't very good at that time. So, okay, I'll go try out for volleyball.
Right.
And played it and loved it. But then, at the same time, kept playing hockey. And then in the winter, played with the basketball team. In the spring, soccer. Swam with the swim team, and just kept doing all sports and loved it. But started club volleyball in grade 9. Or maybe it's grade 10 even. Just loving and excelling at it. And I'd say by grade 11, I had to start kind of weaning off sports, because volleyball was really becoming my thing. But the initial draw was just wanting to do something and play. And I think the other big took us to see the national team play. So had we not done that, had I not been exposed to actually seeing it in person and seeing just how high the game was played and the power and the speed, like, it was mind blowing as grade 9 to see this on TV. You don't, maybe when the Olympics are on, but if you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it. I mean, it's completely different now. If you want to watch volleyball, you can see it online everywhere. But you back in those days, record something on a VHS tape and play it back. Kind of a natural evolution into it, getting better at with club, and had the provincial team in Ontario, and then just got more and more focused on the volleyball side of things, but kept up the other sports as much as I could.
Right. Yeah, the power of something like that is pretty incredible. I think a lot of people that are basketball fans have the fortune of the NBA being on TV for such a long time. Like I grew up watching Michael Jordan with my mom, and then Shaquille O'Neal and Horace Grant, and then the Raptors got a team. For me, my huge moment was the 1993 World Championships were housed in Hamilton, Ontario. That's 3 hours from my hometown, but my grandma lived there, and we trained at a dojo there. So to go into Hamilton, and I got to see a Canadian take a medal. Nicola Gill took a medal in those 93 Worlds. And I saw an American, Jason Morris, who later coached me, who took a bronze medal in those Worlds as well. To see that in person, the best joke in the world, when I saw Yamashita from Japan, he was like the greatest judoka ever, had the world record for winning so many matches in a row. To see these people in person and the impact that had was like, oh, I need to keep doing this. I got to carry a flag in the opening ceremonies for Uzbekistan, actually, as a 10-year-old boy. So it was like so epic. Like that moment, I will never lose that memory. It's burned in there still to this day. And that had a really powerful impact on me, which goes to like the idea of housing these massive international competitions in Canada can have a really powerful effect on everyone that gets to witness it.
Yeah, you cannot understate that. I think this is exactly the same for me. When you see it live, it's just a completely different experience. And yeah, you can see the big four on TV anytime in North America. And, so, football, baseball, all these other sports that are out there that are so great that somebody's got to make the effort. It's like somebody needs to know to take you, who took you to that event. It's like Vaughn took our team to this event.
Right.
You need somebody like that, that next generation to expose the up and coming kids to what's out there and what's possible and what these things are. Because if you just watch mainstream media, you're going to be spoon fed the same stuff. And there's so many other options out there. And that's something that I really loved about being in Europe. I lived in France for different periods of time, and they got a sport newspaper there called L'Equipe. And the coolest thing about L'Equipe is that, yes, the first page or two are always covering soccer or football, as they call it over there. In there, you're reading about track and field, you're reading about rugby, you're reading about just fencing, volleyball, all these different sports, and that exposure to it's the exposure. It's that, opportunity. It's just so important. So any chance that, Canada has or a city has to host some kind of an international tournament, you hope they got to jump on it. It always seems to be a dollars thing. Obviously, it's got to, make money or break even or whatnot. But it's just so valuable for the kids to see that stuff.
Right. Yeah, and it's the other thing that's powerful about that is, I'm sure you feel the same way, is the goal is not that everyone that sees it, and all people that are involved in sport need to, want to, or should become high performance athletes. That's not the case at all. But being involved in things for the same, not everyone needs to stay fit later in life by lifting weights. It might be by playing hockey, it might be by playing basketball, it might be by playing soccer, it might be by running. But getting involved in a sport at a young age and knowing that being physically active and healthy is a really important necessity in life to have a long, healthy life. It makes us present. It removes anxiety. It releases positive endorphins. It keeps you physically active. There's studies on once your VO2 max hits a certain amount, how it directly correlates to life expectancy. So these are really like important things. So when you see something like that, yeah, maybe you don't ever want to become a high performance athlete. That's great. But maybe now in Yellowknife, we have a really strong extracurricular volleyball team thing here. Like there's a lot of volleyball. I meet people all the time and they're all playing volleyball. Sadly, my schedule doesn't really work for it, but people in their 30s playing volleyball for fun to stay physically active. That's awesome. So I think it has an effect not just on the high performance kids, but it also has an effect on helps people live healthier, stronger, and connected lives. Those social sports in your 30s still create those same strong bonds. Like a lot of people, their best friends are the people they play volleyball with in Yellowknife.
So true. And like you said, it's one high performance because, if you look at the numbers, that's not happening. So
Right.
you've got to be, so many things need to happen for you to get to the highest levels of sport, but it's exactly what you said. It's a life skill. It's being able to keep your body able to move and function to live a long and healthy life. And, that's what's like the number 1 and 2 things for, treating or preventing any disease. It's physical activity and nutrition. The sport
Right.
teaches you the whole physical side of it. And you get all those spin-off benefits, like you're saying, socially and mentally, that are just can't be beat.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. There's an expression that I love. I don't know who said it, probably a million people ever, and I definitely didn't coin it, but you are who you associate with. So when you do associate with those people that live that healthy lifestyle, the tide raises all ships. So sometimes I might be saying, Paul, we need to play volleyball, and it might not be the day that you're so motivated to do it, but you get that text message from me and you want to come, and now you join. And then 2 weeks later, it might be me that's dragging my heels, and then you say it, and we're both helping each other get there. And I think sometimes in the advertisement world, and what we see is like, if you want to stay physically healthy and active, you must run on the streets, in your new Nikes, and lift weights. And there's way more options than just that to being physically active,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're going forever about how important sport is, and obviously having been through it, know it. But yeah, just again, when I think about my kids, like, we never said you got to play this sport or that. We just wanted them to be active, enjoy that team environment, the social aspect, and learn that life skill of taking care of their body.
Right.
You only get one.
Yeah. I have one that's interesting. My children are younger, so they're 7 and 4, but I'm cognizant of it, and I don't want to be that person. But so the idea of my kids becoming judoka and competitive, it's hard not to say that there's not a small part of me that loves the idea of it. But I know that that's a slippery slope, and I'm not going to push my kids towards it. But as a father of 5, do you ever feel that, or have you ever felt this inkling similar to myself as a father of like, it would be pretty cool if my kids, if one of them.
Oh yeah.
It's such a
Well,
funny.
I'd be lying if I said I didn't.
Right.
And part of it, it's because it's what I know. So
right.
if that's the route they wanted to go, I feel like I could help them the most.
Right.
Give them pointers, actually be able to give them technical feedback or whatnot. And but yeah, it's interestingly, one of the kids so far played volleyball. As when my oldest son, and he was not competitive, like he played club, but when the season was done, he wasn't. Yeah, for sure. I think having grown up in a sport, you'd want your kids to do it. It might be cool just to see what they could do.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, I'd be lying if I didn't want that. Still have one more shot with the youngest daughter. She's 11. She could still get into it.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny. The one part that I hadn't really thought about, which I think is it's funny. Sometimes the most obvious answers are the ones that slip past us. You know what I mean? So the aspect that you said where you're like, I would love them to do it because as their father, I could help them. And that's the part, like, I sort of see it in this, it's a connection to me thing. But yeah, it's like, as a father, you want to do whatever you can to help your kids succeed. So if you are good in an aspect or passionate about something and you have a knowledge base in it, then you're obviously going to steer them towards that because you can help facilitate their learning and maybe do things that you didn't do right or would have done differently. And I never really thought about that little part of it, I guess, is that I feel like I could help them. Like if they want to become doctors, I don't really like the sight of blood. I'm not going to be very helpful, So, I think, it's funny. Like I could help them at judo. I'm a judo coach, right?
Not so much. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm not going to sit there and help you dissect a mouse. Like that's not my wheelhouse of what I can do for you. So one other area that I find fascinating in sport in general as a sports fan, and I always love watching sport at any level, is the different types of strategizing that goes into play. And so I played a little volleyball. I was when I started high school, I was 4'11", and I was 5'7" when I graduated high school, and I'm a gigantic 5'9" now. So not the typical star volleyball player, but I did play some. and a great sport. I love it. But it's interesting to me is learning like how much time you would have put into as a team into the strategy specific. Is there I would guess there's set plays sort of in volleyball, like how much of your training time outside of just striking the ball and exercising you guys would do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and definitely the further you go in the game, the more there is of it, and the more important it becomes. So, in the professional season, you're playing every weekend in league matches. In the middle of the week, there might be European Cup games, but in a general week, yeah, you'd be watching video of your opponent to identify certain trends that their offense has or that their defense has, and trying to just understand tweaks that we're going to make as a team to compensate or to adjust to things that they do well. So there's a lot of that, but what I always love, it is a team sport, but there's a lot of kind of one-on-one confrontations at the net where, you know, you're coming at me as an attacker, I'm blocking, plan and tendencies that you know, maybe in this rotation, when you're on the front left side of the court, you normally hit the ball cross court 68% of the time. And other times you're going line, or you like to hit it high off my hands, or, you know, like knowing you as an attacker. And then
right.
it's this game of, I loved it because I would remember almost every attack from a match that each time we went against each other. And what were you trying to do, and what did you do in that situation? And the last time I played you, and I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you as a when you're on the mat of, you know, you must study your opponents like crazy. And the cool thing then is relating. There's that kind of mini battle going on, but then I also have supportive teammates, and so the big thing in volleyball is the communication of, you know, okay, I'm feeling this, or I'm seeing this happening, and letting the guy behind me know so that he can adjust his position based on where I'm going to maybe move my hands and leave an opening for you. So he's ready for that other shot and quickly. So you go into a game definitely with a lot of preparation and a game plan, and, you know, you stick to it. But then the best teams I was on were just continually talking and adjusting. What are we seeing? Are they doing what we thought they would do in the first part of this set? You know, this guy's not playing well. Let's shift and focus on these guys. And just, it's this continual thing on the defensive side, on the offensive side, one-on-one, and then in relation to your teammates. So it's a very cool environment and super important. And the more you can, where the training pays off is that you the rap about move or how to block it up and frees your mind up to more. And that's the real key, is being able to see what's happening and not be thinking about what you're actually doing. Like, you know, you should be able to like back off the net to your defensive position with your eyes closed. You've done it so many times, and be in the right spot so that you can actually back off and take in the information and then make the right decision. So
yeah,
does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. It leads me to like a number of areas that I'm interested in. And it also reminds me that I saw this, I don't remember where I saw it, but it was talking about high performance athletes compared to quality athletes, people that play and are good, and high performance national team members. And one specific reference was volleyball. But I don't know, you know, our brains are funny things, so things sort of just come in. And I remember seeing this thing, and they said, everyone's playing the game and everyone has the game happening really quickly. And it's not necessarily that you're lacking decisiveness between high performance and lower performance. It was recognition of the scenario very quickly. So they would put a picture up from someone that's a high performance athlete and someone who's a good club player. And it would be a picture of the volleyball court. And you'd see where all the players are and the ball is. And they would put the picture up like for this period of time, like a snap second. And a high performance volleyball player like yourself that snap second, you'd be like, you would know exactly what's happening from this snap image of what things are in the court, where someone that hasn't played as long, they wouldn't recognize it as quickly. So we might internalize that or portray that as someone's lacking decisiveness, but really what they're lacking is recognition as to what's happening in the game. Whereas yourself, you would see that and go, this person's going here to go to this position for this strike, and this person's setting here. You'd recognize that so quickly. And hint, sort of like a baseball player recognizing the type of pitch is coming by that snap moment of the spin rate of the ball. Same idea. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, that's an interesting aspect, is learning to recognize things more so than thinking you're incapable of acting quickly. It's not whether or not you can act quickly.
Yeah, it's that pattern recognition that the experience brings. And yeah, there's an amazing book called Range by David Epstein.
I like his writing.
In the beginning of the book, it's comparing Federer and Tiger Woods and their upbringing. And it's a book about, do you specialize or not? And the thing that you just reminded me of, and it is almost identical kind of example, where he's saying that they did a study where they had chess players, a truck would drive by with an image on the board of a chess match.
Mm-hmm.
And the chess player could just automatically lay out all the pieces on the board identically.
Right.
Is that when they had a truck go by or flash by with the pieces in an irregular, in a situation that would not occur in a game,
mm-hmm.
just kind of shuffled, they couldn't do it. Because it's not part of that.
I haven't seen that happen.
Pattern set, that it's an abnormality that doesn't apply really, even though it is a chess set and a board and the same pieces. They're in positions that they would never get into, and they couldn't do it. And because they had no experience with it. And they fantastic book. It goes on about just, if you relate to the sport world, the kind of key takeaway is, don't specialize when you're young. Be a great athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be doing gymnastics when they're young, just so they have incredible strength and body awareness, right? And then, but there's so many threads in the book about the importance of learning to read. And by read, I mean read the game, read the situation. Scenario. Like you said, be able to read the spin on the ball. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like another example, I don't know if it's from that book, but it's the Talent Code. I can't remember who wrote that, but again, they studying the practice of baseball players and players who were forced to, you think in practice that you want success, and you do to some extent, where the one group would just be pitched fastballs and then curveballs, and they would hit, say, 7 out of 10 because they got it down, learned how to read the curve. And then they had another group where they had a variety of pitches coming. They didn't know what it would be, and they're hitting, say, 3 out of 10. But then when you get them in the real life or in a game situation, it's that group that performs better because they've been flexing that muscle of reading, which applies to real life games where there is variability, as opposed to this kind of closed loop practice where it's predictable. So there's some really interesting stuff about that. I don't even know how we got on this topic, but
I'm not sure. But either way, I find that that just makes I love hearing those types of things. Number one, I want to read both those books. One was Range, and what was the other one?
It's the Talent Code, I think.
Talent Code.
I'll remember the name after. Sorry.
I think David Epstein also wrote The Sports Gene. I believe he wrote that. If you haven't read The Sports Gene,
and he was a writer for Sports Illustrated too.
Right. So he definitely wrote The Sports Gene. That's one of my favorites too. Incredible. They talk about how the Australian team started moving people to different sports based on their physiology, but they're already high performance athlete, which again goes to the point of not specializing too early. And then the medal haul that they had in 2000 from a country that's not a huge population base and not this huge history of success. Another one that I really, really love, that I like the idea of helping people to think critically and thinking critically myself. Another one that I loved was, everyone's read or heard of or seen the movie from Moneyball, but there's one called Big Data Baseball, which is about the Pittsburgh Pirates ending their long playoff drought, what they did to create that, and ideas they took. And it's similarly, all of these terms that you're hearing now, when they talk about, I don't know how much you watch baseball, when they talk about pitch framing, that was started really by Pittsburgh bringing in Russell Martin because he did a great job of not moving his glove when he caught the ball. They this incredible amount of shifting in baseball, pulling a shortstop and putting him as the fourth outfielder, that kind of stuff. Pittsburgh was doing that like a crazy amount, and offense was expensive. So they became a really defensively sound team because defense is cheap, but offense is expensive. That's another great one. But those are two that I want to add to my list for sure, because yeah, I find that interesting, and just thinking about those concepts helps me to sort of think outside in life. It's like you start to look at things from different angles. It's really hard to come up with a creative solution to something when you're always just looking through your own perspective. And so when something gives you a different perspective, if it's a different sport or it's a different course of work, I find that can sort of trigger something in my brain like, oh, I could look at this differently.
Yeah, and that's what range is all about. It's about how, breakthroughs and things come from cross-pollination of people from different disciplines. An engineer bringing in an idea that applies to building a bridge into the operating theater, or likewise, just that it's that different angle, that different perspective that just can open a door or present you as something that you just haven't thought about, because you're specialized and this is the way it's always been done, and this is how I was trained, and a sport has a lot of that. So you see kind of revolutionize the game in some way by thinking creatively. So it's what's so cool about sport, is just the evolution component of it too. Love it.
Yeah, that's what I love so much. Like I love baseball even if I never watch a game. Like I know it's like weird, but it's like I read articles about things that they do and how much it's changed, and you go decade by decade and it's just constantly evolving. They have a really powerful thing, which is exorbitant amounts of money. So they hire MIT Dean's List grads in mathematics to come up with creative solutions to how we can objectively look at a player's quality. That can lead to really interesting things, and most sports don't have that, and judo definitely doesn't have that. But it leads to, like, not that judo could ever get to that place, but it leads to like all these different things. Like, we don't have to be so small-minded, I guess, or whatever, that these are the only solutions to the problems. Like, there's so many solutions, there's so many ways to do things, and sort of allowing our brain to just think of, and like we said before, sometimes the most obvious solutions are so simple, so obvious. I spoke to, when we were in Toronto, I spoke to a gentleman, I can't think of his name right now, but he was commentating the rugby for the Olympics. And I said, if you could do everything over again, what would you do differently? And he said, I would have seen a professional running coach earlier. And I was like, of course, it's so obvious. If you can run more efficiently in a game like rugby, you're going to be better. You're going to have a better, better stamina, all of those kinds of things. Like, what an obvious answer.
Yeah. The best ones always are, aren't they? That's simple.
Yeah. So I guess to that point, if you were to re-navigate your career, not that you live life with a regret on what your career was or anything like that, but if you think, if there was a way that you could have made maybe your learning curve or your playing career more efficient, that you maybe would have been able to make some little gains, is there anything you're like, this would have been good to know when I was younger, or this is something I would have trained more?
Oh, wow. The easy one that jumps out to mind first was just later in my career, had a much greater understanding, and thanks to my wife, who was our strength coach at the time too. She was a strength coach for the national volleyball teams for 8 years and ran the National Sports Center in Manitoba for strength and conditioning. But she did so much with me on just working with my nervous system and foot speed. And because I'm naturally, I would say, relative to everyone I was playing with, slower feet. And so, just the things that she did to identify that and help me just be quicker on my feet, and also just doing unique things I never would have thought of that helped me perform. Would have loved to have that sooner in my career, because I feel like it's the back half of the career that I got it, but also helped extend my career. But like, for example, we had one time when we were in the Final Four of a European Cup in Turkey, super tough semifinal, which we won. Late in the season, you're exhausted. She got me up on the day of the final and had just ran me through a really light nervous system, wake up, footwork pattern and stuff, and then just never would have done it. Like my instinct 8 years before that or whatever would have been, yep, just gonna lay in and rest and do nothing until our regular kind of pre-game stuff. But her understanding where my nervous system was at, what I needed to kind of just get the most out of it later in the day.
Right.
Going through that match went great, but just little things like that physically would love to tell my younger self. And then I think in terms of skills and learning the game, I think I would have just I guess the biggest one would be to just start, and again, learn this later, but I wish I knew it sooner, of in practice, starting just with the things more often that I wasn't good at, and working on weaknesses first.
Right.
Because, you walk into the gym, if you're a basketball player, most players go in and start shooting from where they like to shoot from their spot, instead of, starting where you're not good at, and just prioritize with that weakness a little more. I think that would have just accelerated development even more. Like I did, had great coaches all the way through who would point these things out and get me to work on these things, but just personally thinking about that more often and getting in and getting better at it. So again, later on in my career, the first thing I do in practice, I go in and get one of the assistant coaches just to help me with some defense stuff, because I was a weaker defensive player. Offensive side was great, but defense relatively, again, to the other skills, not as good. So would address that. Just that basic understanding as a younger player, I think, of work on those weaknesses, get after those, because those are what your opponent are going to be going after.
Right. Yeah. The thing that I like to tell guys sometimes, or think about, or I wish I did as well, is put yourself in the uncomfortable situations until they become comfortable, because those situations are inevitable. And if you feel uncomfortable in them, you're not going to perform, right? Yeah.
I love that. That's a great way to frame it, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, really. Earlier, with all the scouting that's going on, and literally knowing that you hit 72% of your swings from that position in this rough angle, what you're good at, they know what you're not as good at.
Right.
And when it comes down to it, when everybody's playing well, those are the little things that can make the difference.
Right. And from when you're working on an individual skill, targeting those uncomfortable situations. And then the second thing that I think we're both going towards as well is when we're scrimmaging in practice, the goal of scrimmaging, or in judo sparring in practice, the goal, it's so easy because we're all so hyper competitive to be in that position. It's so easy to play that game to win. And an in practice scrimmage is to develop the skills and develop as a player. You played more scrimmages than matches in tournaments than you can probably imagine. And we often do that with the idea of winning those. The winning or losing of those is beyond inconsequential. And I think for me, it's like trying to frame it that it doesn't matter if I win this round of Randori. It's that I'm working towards this goal of developing as a skill. And it's so easy once you get into the game moment to just play the game, which then you're going to lean on your skills where you're more proficient.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it makes me think of something I think that really helped me was exactly that with a scrimmage, was being less worried about the outcome. Obviously, I was playing to win, because you do need to play to win and find a way to figure out to win. There's so many variables on the court of you've got to solve problems and get the right solution based on who plays the first contact. All of a sudden, your setter's on the ground, so somebody else has to set. That has to happen in the game. You have to work through those. We call them out of system scenarios in volleyball, where just you're not in your normal flow, and so you've got to be able to just figure those things out in scrimmage and find a way to score and win. But more importantly, it was almost, I'd think about it of, say we figure it out, say we get a good setup and somebody hits the ball with half their hand, and it's a fluke and it just floats over the block and drops in and scores. That's exactly right. Like, where the winning doesn't matter, the way that ball hit matters. And having the attention on the quality of the output as opposed to the outcome, that little nuance makes a huge difference of, yes,
Right.
win, but win with actions that will actually, you know, more than likely secure success in a match.
Right. Right.
Does that make sense? Like that little
Yeah, totally.
difference? Yeah, because you can definitely win like we want to make sure in training that the outcome is a high percentage, very positive action
Mhm.
that in a real game will remain a high percentage thing. And so, yeah, like you're exactly right. You don't want to be winning that scrimmage, but I'm thinking of it as how you win is more important.
Right. We don't want to win that scrimmage at the cost of athletic development or strategic development or anything like that. It's the winning or losing of that is with the intent of developing further, because the game is where it matters or whatever. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And
the
last thing I guess I wanted to touch on was the other thing that I've found is I found this more as a coach than an athlete, because I don't know if I ever really did it properly as an athlete. So is having a routine, the importance of the day routine of the day you're going to compete. And I think I see that more and more when I see a child or teen or whatever with a lot of anxiety going into a match. The bigger the tournament, the more anxiety it is. And so what I try to get people to do is your routine doesn't really matter to a degree in terms of what it is. But having a routine, sort of like, I like to eat this for breakfast. I know that I'm not going to have an upset stomach. If I decide to have pancakes with a lot of maple syrup on the day of a big match, that might not sit well. So what you eat, just finding your process the day that you're going to compete so that you are in the most relaxed place you can be. The day of an event is stressful enough. So having as many controllable things controlled in a sense that this is what I do. It's a subconscious. I listen to, AC/DC before I play. I eat toast with peanut butter, whatever that is. I do 17 jumps that I found is like having the importance. It gets funny in terms of like, there's movies making fun of athletes. He didn't watch his draw strap because he liked flies or whatever from this ridiculous baseball movie. But it's like, having this routine that this is just what I go through, I think can be really, really good for anxiety. So I don't know if you had a process or if that was something that you looked at as an important part.
Oh, it's a great question. I feel like for me, because it was huge. It was paramount for what I was doing. So the most simple example, and we were talking about kind of just the flow of a game, but in volleyball, the only kind of closed loop motor skill pattern where it's the same every time is the serve.
Right.
So like a free throw shot, like swinging the golf club, or, like you're doing the same setup. You have complete control over that situation. Right. You have 8 seconds. The court is always the same size, and that's always the same height. It's the same. So a routine there is just an absolute must. So goes without saying. So that's kind of like the playing example of routine. But what you're talking about is something I think that I was really good at. The way I think of it is that it was almost like I was always running to a point, just experimenting and being super aware of my routine. So like you touched on the food, like would never, ever, ever think about eating something I haven't had before on the day of a game or close to a practice. There's risk there. Like you said, you could eat something, you have an upset stomach, there goes practice, there goes the game. So I was super cognizant of what I was eating. And then what I would do is I would, eat something or try certain things and then take the time to think about how did I feel?
Right.
Not just because you can eat something, go to practice and forget about it. Or you can eat something and actually compare. Well, the other day I had, a cheese sandwich, an apple, and a coffee, whatever it is, 2 hours before practice.
Right.
This day I had it an hour and a half before. Any difference? Yes, no, maybe not. And, you can't test it once. So I was doing this throughout my career so that by, 12 years in, 13 years in, it was pretty locked down. Like I really knew. And where it became really important too, and alluded to around the footwork stuff with my wife, and was around the types of lifts that I would have how many hours or days before the game and all those sorts of things, to really just continually being aware of how I was reacting to those different stimuluses of either working out, of eating, of sleeping, of where the nap is in terms of before the game, to, you know, put me in the best possible chance to perform.
Right.
To eliminate those kinds of things. So it's super, super important. But on the flip side too, just having played so long, I also know that the best laid plans can be chucked out the window. I had a teammate who literally got locked in the bathroom of the hotel. The lock broke. We're going to play the Dutch national team.
My God.
And we could not get him out of the bathroom.
Wow.
So there goes the plan, right?
Right.
But, you know, like these crazy things happen. So
Right.
all kinds of things can throw you off. So you have to, as much as I need it, that's I guess what it is that I had a plan. I knew what I needed. And I also was aware that sometimes it got threw off. And so I would, again, just think about, okay, the plan went out the window. What worked there? What didn't? What could I maybe change next time this comes up, or something similar?
Right.
And so has our warm up been cut short 30 minutes, or now do we have to sit an extra 2 hours before the game starts because of a delay of a match before us?
Right.
And what I just ate, now I ate at the wrong time, but I'm just like, no, okay. So if I eat at the wrong time, I know if I have a banana 30 minutes later, then I feel the same. Continual experiment that you run on yourself if you're willing to look at it. And I think super important, just really, really trying to understand my body and how it felt from various things, what felt best after games, how much stretching, what to stretch, what to leave alone, you know. And you're continually learning and your body changes, but I think you got to be willing to put in that work if you want to really get the most out of yourself.
Right. The one thing that I love that you mentioned was the other aspects, like objectively looking at performance in sport can be really hard sometimes, especially if it's not a specific sport, like, you know, and hard to get those statistics in short time frame, but measurable items leading in can be really beneficial. How much weight you're lifting is very measurable. How many hours of sleep you're getting a night, how many naps you're taking. Are you taking naps? How long is the nap for? How many grams of protein or carbohydrates or whatever? Knowing those things that are measurable and being able to measure them can get you really close to an objective goal or understanding of where you're at. Whereas, like, did I perform well today in volleyball? Yeah, you might have a good sense of it, but it's hard to things aren't always so clear and crisp. So the things that we can make clear and are controllable can really help you narrow in. When I eat this much protein and I eat this and I've done these lifts, then I know that I'll feel good because I have many times before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And there is that fine line, because there's all 100 stories, like you mentioned, the jock strap, whatever, but sometimes those things become superstition.
That's you don't want
player,
that.
like this has to happen, or and tying their performance to something that being said, I still certain things I would always do that didn't matter. I don't know, you know.
Right.
Just
yeah, like if you lose your favorite pair of socks
coming out on the mat, or
I get, actually, no, I'm not necessarily superstitions, but I had one thing that was a funny thing that I used to do is dealing with anxiety. For some reason, having your grip on someone's uniform, their judo gi, having the grip on it is the match, right? You have your grip on someone and you're trying to throw them. And so leading up to the match, you're standing on the sideline waiting. That's where the anxiety is building up. You're about to perform, and not having a grip of the judo gi is like, I'm not doing it yet. So what I would do sometimes, this might seem a little weird, is sometimes I'd grab my own gi and hold it because it feels like I'm closer to the match. I'm holding a gi. Or if someone was standing beside me, I would just hold on to their uniform. And it felt like the anxiety would sort of flow out of me into it because I'm basically doing a match, and it probably looked weird at times. It's like, you know, kind of like holding your friend's hand, but I'd just be holding onto some part of their uniform, and it just made me feel like I'm that much closer to actually doing it. And once the bell starts and you've done the sport your whole life, that's not, the anxiety mostly goes away. There might be the very beginning
Yes.
before the first exchange, but once you're doing it, this is what I do. This is my natural element. It's leading to that element.
Yeah, you're present. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
But
you're leading in, you're thinking ahead, you're thinking about, you're not present in that sense. Yeah. I love that
Right.
gripping thing. That makes so much sense to me.
yeah, it was like a really, I would just hold it, or I'd hold someone else's. And I remember on multiple occasions saying to someone, can you stand right here? And they're like, well, I'm just going to hold on to your gi. I know it's weird, but don't make this awkward. You know,
I know we
that
just
kind of
met.
thing. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine, Thomas, whatever your name is. Let me just hold on to your, and people were pretty cool about it. You know, like athletes were all weirdos. So, so mostly I never had anyone be like, no, that's weird. That never happened. So, but yeah, it was almost like I could almost see it. It's like I could almost see the stress and anxiety sort of leaving my body. Not fully. I mean, you're always going to have some butterflies, but that was something that I found like was a weird little quirk, little picadillo.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, it was awesome to have you on. It was so great to have a conversation again and just see you as a friend, to have a chat. But I think there's like so much that I personally can take away from the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Gee, Josh, thanks for having me on. And I know we kind of dove into the heavy stuff right there out of the gate with identity, but
Right.
I think it's really important to talk about and share. And
Right.
I love how you think about sport, and I think we're both just fired up by it. There's so many great benefits to it.
Right.
Kids are out there listening. Get out and try things. Get out there and get active. And again, thanks for having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you.